It was around 6 in the morning when I opened the door of my lonely house in the Adirondack Mountains to breathe in the fresh forest air, filled with the smell of pine and morning dew. I, Aidan Brody, a former journalist and now a beginner writer, wasn't even fully awake yet. I had just stepped outside in my worn-out flannel shirt and scuffed boots, yawning and dreaming of a strong coffee that would help me wake up and start another day in my self-chosen isolation in the middle of the wild. And in that moment I froze, like I had been hit by electricity, because there, just a few steps away from me, stood a huge black bear. Its presence seemed to fill all the space around me, making the air feel heavy and still. The animal didn't move, didn't growl, didn't show any signs of aggression. It just stood there on my porch, breathing heavily, its body shaking, its fur tangled and wet in some spots, like it had just come out of a rough river or a violent fight with some unknown enemy. What struck me most were the bear's eyes. Dark, wet, almost human-like eyes, and it looked like they were actually crying. Tears were running down its face like from a broken faucet. I had never in my life seen a wild animal cry for real, and the sight went straight to my heart, making me forget all fear of this powerful creature that could have crushed my skull with a single swipe of its paw. And only then did I notice that the bear was holding a small, lifeless cub in its mouth, its legs hanging down limp, its head tilted to the side, showing no signs of life, like a rag doll dropped by a careless child. At that moment I realized this wasn't just a bear. This was a mother with a dying baby. I wanted to slam the door shut and reach for the old rifle hanging on the kitchen wall, the natural reaction of anyone finding a wild beast on their doorstep. But something in the way she behaved, in that silent, motherly desperation, stopped me. It made me feel that this wasn't a threat, but a mother standing on the edge of a tragedy too deep for me to name. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst through my ribs, and I slowly stepped back, not taking my eyes off the bear. To my shock, she followed me with a few careful steps. Then, with an almost human kind of gentleness, she laid her baby right on the wooden floor of my porch. Then she backed up, sat down on her back legs, and stared at me without blinking, like she was waiting for something I couldn't yet understand. Against every survival instinct I had, against every story I'd ever heard about bear attacks, against all the warnings from park rangers, I got down on my knees in front of the unmoving cub. He looked so small, no bigger than a medium-sized cocker spaniel, with ribs sticking out and dried blood on one ear. And just when I was almost sure he was dead, his chest moved. Just the tiniest twitch. So small I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching so hard. I looked up at the mother bear, who was still staring at me with a strange, conscious look of hope, and the words came out of my mouth before I even had time to think. "I'll try, okay? I'll try to help him." The bear didn't move, like she understood every word I said. With my heart about to explode, I gently wrapped the shaking cub in my flannel shirt and slowly, without any sudden moves, stepped back into the house. I was expecting growling or an attack at any moment, but the bear just sat there, silent, like she somehow knew something I didn't. Inside, I laid the cub on the couch and rushed around trying to gather anything that could help. Towels, a heating pad, bottles of water, acting more on instinct than knowledge. I kept glancing out the window where the bear still sat, an unmoving shadow, her eyes fixed on my house. The cub was cold to the touch, limp but not completely gone, and I stood in the middle of my living room holding this tiny, almost lifeless creature, thinking, what the hell am I supposed to do now? And in that moment I realized this wasn't just some strange meeting with a wild animal, not just a weird twist of fate. This was something more, something that had chosen me. Despite all the laws of nature and common sense, I wasn't ready for this responsibility, as not at all, but it seemed like the mother bear was. She had chosen to trust me, and she stayed, waiting quietly at the edge of my property, watching my house all day while I was trying to save her cub, who, it seemed, refused to leave this world without a fight. The cub was lying on my couch among the towels, motionless and cold. I dropped to my knees and carefully pressed 2 fingers to his tiny ribs, trying to feel a pulse or any sign of breathing. Feeling nothing for sure, I held my breath and leaned in close enough to catch the earthy forest smell of his wet fur mixed with the metallic scent of blood. And right then, I felt it. The smallest rise and fall of his chest. Weak but real breathing that made me exhale with relief. "You're alive, little one. You're still here with us." I wrapped the cub tighter in my flannel shirt and hurried to the back room, where I found an old space heater. I plugged it in, cranked it to full power, and spread out every soft thing I could find. Blankets, towels, pillows, building a kind of warm little nest for my tiny patient. His breathing was shallow, his chest barely moved, and one of his back legs looked oddly stiff, like it was broken or paralyzed. Around one ear, the blood had dried into a dark crust, and it became clear this wasn't just exhaustion or weakness. Something serious had happened to him. Outside, I heard scratching, and looking through the window, I saw that the mother bear was still there, sitting like an ancient statue, patiently watching the house where her baby was lying. I grabbed my phone and dialed Rachel Kowalski, the closest vet I knew, even though she usually dealt with farm animals. "Rachel, it's Aiden. I've got a bear cub at my house. He's injured, really bad. The mother brought him to me and left him right on my porch. She's still here, waiting outside." There was a long pause filled with doubt before Rachel finally said, "Aiden, are you sure you haven't been drinking?" "No, damn it. I'm completely serious and I don't have time to explain. What do I do to keep him alive?" After another pause, she sighed and began giving me clear instructions. "Warm him up. Check if there's any open bleeding. Don't give him solid food yet, only fluids. You can make a mix of honey and warm water and give it to him drop by drop. I'll call Jenny. She used to work at a wildlife rehab center. Hold on, we'll be there soon." I hung up and went to the kitchen where I found an old bottle of raw honey. I mixed it with warm water and, using a turkey baster, the closest thing I had to a dropper, I carefully opened the cub's mouth and let a few drops of liquid inside. At first there was no reaction, but after a few tries his tiny tongue moved slightly and I felt a surge of hope. "That's it. Come on, little fighter. Stay with me." I sat beside him for probably over an hour, talking, humming, sometimes swearing quietly to myself in helplessness. All while the mother bear stayed completely still outside. I opened the door just a crack, and she raised her head, met my eyes, then lowered it again. That simple movement showed such unexpected trust that I still remember it and wonder how a wild animal managed to overcome its fear of a human. By noon, the cub moved his paw for the first time, just a little, lazily, like he was checking if his muscles still worked. I actually laughed out loud from relief, not even noticing the tears running down my cheeks. "You're not dying today, little one. Not on my watch," I whispered, looking at the cub, though deep inside I was panicking, fully aware that I was just a writer with a handful of towels and a heater, trying to save a wild animal I knew nothing about. By the middle of the day, my living room looked like a crazy animal clinic. Blankets were spread over every surface, towels were piled high, the heater was working at full power, and the bear cub was lying right in front of it, wrapped up like a newborn baby, with one little paw sticking out. The wound on his paw had started bleeding again, and when I looked closer, it looked like a bite mark, swollen, red, and clearly infected, which could kill him faster than the cold or exhaustion. I grabbed some hydrogen peroxide, the kind I usually used for treating cuts on myself, soaked a cloth in it, and carefully pressed it to the wound. The cub flinched, and strangely enough, I was happy about that. Pain meant he was still fighting, that his nervous system was still working. From outside came a soft growl, and I looked out the window again. The mother bear hadn't moved an inch, still sitting there, her massive body completely still, but her eyes followed every movement, every shadow inside my house. I opened the door just a little and quietly told her, "He's still with us. Barely, but he's holding on." Of course, she didn't answer, didn't growl. She just let out a deep breath, like she understood the meaning of my words. I went back inside and sat down on the floor next to the cub. I gave him more honey water, and this time he clicked his little tongue more clearly, trying to lick the sweet liquid, a small but definite sign of progress. My phone rang. It was Rachel again. Jenny says you're crazy, she said, but she's driving up to you with medicine. She'll be there in a couple of hours. Thank God, his paw's bleeding. Looks like a bite. And I think he has a fever, I told her quickly. Keep him warm. Don't make any sudden moves. Keep giving him fluids. And for heaven's sake, don't open that door wide. That mama bear won't stay calm forever, Rachel warned me. And I knew she was right. It was already a miracle that the mother bear hadn't torn down the walls of my house looking for her baby. But for some reason, she trusted me. And that fact made me even more nervous. An hour passed, then another. The cub started moving more, trying to turn over. And I whispered to him softly, "Easy, buddy. Not yet, just rest." Then he made a strange sound. Not a growl, not a whimper. Something in between, like a broken toy slowly coming back to life. I cleaned his paw carefully again. The bleeding was slowing down. The wound was still red and swollen, but it didn't look as dangerous anymore. And that was something I could work with. Outside, the mother bear started showing signs of worry for the first time. She walked a few steps back and forth, like her body couldn't decide whether to stay or leave, and then she sat down again in her old spot. I lit the wood stove to make it even warmer in the house, even though it was already stuffy for me. But the cub needed the heat more than I needed fresh air. As evening came, the shadows shifted, and then a small miracle happened. The cub opened one eye, just one, and looked straight at me. In that look, there was no wildness, no fear, only awareness, like he was seeing me and somehow understood who I was. "You're not alone anymore, little one," I whispered, feeling a strange warmth inside me that had nothing to do with the heater. He blinked and drifted back to sleep, but for the first time all day, I felt like he might actually make it. Not a guarantee, not a promise, but a chance. A chance I didn't have that morning. When Rachel and Ginny, the wildlife specialists, finally arrived, the sun was already setting. The mother bear had retreated into the shadows of the forest but hadn't left, still watching the house from a safe distance. "Oh my God, you weren't joking," Rachel breathed when she saw the cub, and Ginny immediately got to work, examining the little one with professional focus. "This is a bite from an adult male," she said after a careful check. "Sometimes male bears kill other cubs to make the female go into heat again. This little one was lucky his mother managed to save him and bring him to you. It's amazing she chose a human. Maybe she had been watching you before making such a desperate move." That thought made me shiver. The thought that a wild animal could have been watching me, judging me, before trusting me with the most precious thing she had. Ginny and Rachel spent several hours treating the wounds, giving antibiotics, and restoring the fluids in the little body. By the time they left, the cub was breathing more steadily, and his paw was professionally bandaged. "We'll leave you some medicine and instructions," Ginny said as she packed up her things. "But once he starts getting better, you'll have to return him to the wild. He can't stay with you forever, Aiden." I nodded, though deep down I already felt how attached I was becoming to this small creature who had fought for his life right in front of me. Over the next 2 weeks, the cub recovered surprisingly fast. His wounds healed, his appetite came back, and he started showing curiosity about the world around him, exploring my home with more and more confidence. I named him Baxter, just because it felt right. Even though I knew I shouldn't give a name to a wild animal, shouldn't grow attached to someone who would soon have to return to where he belonged. The mother bear kept coming back every day, sometimes getting closer to the house, but usually staying at a distance. Always alert, always watching. I left food out for her, which she sometimes accepted and sometimes ignored, as if she didn't want to rely on human help more than absolutely necessary. One day, just as Baxter was moving confidently through the house, playing and even trying to climb on the furniture, I got a surprise visit from Deputy Louise Gentry. "Aiden, I've heard you've got a bear cub living with you, and that his mother has basically settled on your property," she said, getting straight to the point as she stood on the very spot where, 2 weeks earlier, the mother bear had stood with her cub in her mouth. I didn't try to deny the obvious. I told her the whole story. She listened with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. When I finished, she just said, "You're insanely lucky no one's been hurt. But this is a problem, Aiden. Wildlife Services already knows. They're planning to come in 3 days to take the cub, and maybe relocate the mother too. I can stall them a little, but it's your call. You need to do something. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept watching Baxter curled up in his nest of blankets. So warm, so safe, and so completely wrong for a wild animal. I knew I couldn't keep him here forever, couldn't raise him like a pet, couldn't take away his chance to be what he was born to be, a free bear in the Adirondack forest. And at the same time, the thought of letting him go hurt like hell, like tearing off a piece of myself. In the morning, I made my decision. I wasn't going to wait for wildlife services to show up. I wasn't going to wait for the mother bear to work up the courage to come get him. I gently placed Baxter into a large bin lined with his familiar blankets. I added his favorite toy, an old tennis ball, and packed a little food for the road. Then I climbed into my truck and headed deep into the forest, to a place I thought might be close to the mother bear's den. I drove slowly along the wooded trails, watching carefully for signs of bear activity, until I reached a small clearing surrounded by thick spruce trees. I stopped the truck and got out. I opened the bin, and Baxter blinked in the bright light, sniffing the familiar forest smells. "This is your real home, little guy," I said, feeling a lump rising in my throat. I stepped back, giving him space to climb out and look around on his own. He took a few hesitant steps, then stopped and looked at me, like he was asking what was going on, why we were here. And then we both heard the sound of branches cracking. From the edge of the clearing, the mother bear was watching us. She looked cautious but not angry. Our eyes met, and in hers I saw again that same strange awareness I had seen on the very first day. I slowly stepped back farther, showing her I meant no harm, showing her I was letting go of her cub, giving him back to the world he came from. Baxter froze, looking back and forth between me and his mother, like he was torn between two worlds, between trust and instinct, between human warmth and the call of the wild. The mother bear let out a quiet sound, something between a growl and a purr, and the cub turned toward her. He took a few hesitant steps, stopped, then a few more. My heart was ready to break as I watched the distance between them shrink, as a mother's love brought back together two creatures once separated by cruelty and chance. When they were almost nose to nose, Baxter suddenly turned and ran quickly back to me, pressing his little face against my knees, as if saying goodbye or maybe thanking me. I'll never know for sure. I knelt down and allowed myself, just once more, to stroke his soft fur, whispering words he couldn't understand, but maybe could feel. "Go live your life, little brave one. You'll be all right." Then I gently gave him a small push toward his mother, and this time he didn't hesitate. With little jumps he reached her, and she carefully sniffed him all over, like making sure he was truly all right, that this was really her cub, alive and safe. And then something happened I didn't expect. The mother bear lifted her head and looked straight at me, and to my amazement, she gave a slight nod before turning and slowly walking away into the forest, leading her cub, who looked back just once before disappearing forever among the trees. I stood in the clearing for a long time, feeling a strange mix of sadness and peace, of loss and rightness, like closing the final chapter of a book I had never planned to write, but that had changed me forever. I returned to my empty house, which now seemed too quiet, too spacious without the little brown whirlwind turning everything upside down. I gathered up the blankets, toys, bowls, all the traces of Baxter's stay, and packed them into a box I carried to the attic, knowing I wouldn't need them anymore, but unable to part with them either. Months passed. I returned to my usual life, writing my book, walking through the forest, enjoying the silence. But sometimes, especially at dusk, I would go out on the porch with a cup of tea and look toward the edge of the forest, knowing that somewhere out there, among the trees, lived a bear cub who had once slept on my couch and drank honey from my hand. And then one autumn morning, I stepped outside and saw a small gift on the porch, a handful of ripe wild berries, carefully placed in a little pile, as if someone had taken the time to collect them. There was no one around, but I knew who had done it. I smiled, looking into the forest, where I thought I saw a shadow flicker, maybe just a play of light, Or maybe the mother and her cub, who had once been part of my life, letting me know they were all right, that they remembered. Since then, every autumn, when the leaves start to change color, I find small gifts on my porch. Berries, pine cones, once even a beautiful stone. As if someone is still trying to say, we're still here, we remember, we're grateful. And it reminds me that sometimes the most important encounters in our lives happen without warning, and the deepest connections are formed in moments when we least expect them. Now, as I write my book, I often think about that mother bear who trusted me with the most precious thing she had, and about the cub who taught me that to love means knowing how to let go. In a world where the line between wild and tame seems so clear, they reminded me that compassion knows no boundaries, and trust can be born in the most unexpected places, overcoming fear and prejudice. And when visitors ask me about the small wooden bear figure on my shelf, I smile and say it's just a souvenir from the Adirondacks. But for me, it's something more. A reminder of those few weeks when my house became a shelter for a wild creature. And I became, if only for a little while, the guardian of a life that was never mine to keep, but only to protect, before returning it to its rightful owner, the endless forest and the mother who never stopped waiting.